Hello, sweet souls, and welcome to the We Are the Medicine podcast. I am your host, Dania Anastasia. I am a spiritual being having a human experience as a planter of seeds, alternative medicine practitioner, and trail guide on the path of life. We Are the Medicine is an exploration of the human experience through our stories. Our stories heal. Our stories are our medicine. Our experiences are our medicine. This is how we learn, grow, inspire, expand, and connect. My hope is that you will listen for inspiration and deeper understanding of how your individual life plays a role in that of the collective. I also hope to engage you, the listener, in conversations around your own dinner tables, in cafes and boardrooms, so that we may all begin to hold space for one another. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the We Are the Medicine podcast, Miss Ann White. She is a native of Bradford, Pennsylvania, and is no stranger to the health and wellness community on this planet. I first met Ann through a mutual friend only a few years ago when she'd requested a special order from me. She has traveled extensively and has many accomplishments and certificates under her belt, including physical therapist assistant from St. Philip's College in San Antonio, certified in plant-based nutrition through Cornell University, certified personal trainer, certified behavioral change specialist, a certified corrective exercise specialist, all through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. Ann currently resides in Texas and is a caregiver to her 91-year-old mom. Her future goals are to offer a combination of health coaching, personal training, contributing to group activities, retreats, and education for health and wellness for women. I am so thrilled to have you here today, Ann. Let's get this started. So welcome.
Great. Thanks. Well, I'm really glad to be here.
So I'm going to kind of just open the floor up to you. You can start with whatever you'd like to, but I'm just going to kind of prompt you just with one question.
Okay.
Your life story, and tell us a little bit about how you have arrived at this space in this moment today.
Okay, sure. So that's pretty important to the whole thing that I do now with my whole food plant-based eating. I grew up in Bradford, and I lived there for my entire childhood in the same house. My dad was a doctor there. And so I lived there the entire time. Of course, you know, the land of delicious Italian food and all those wonderful things. I was always also a very active kid because we lived out kind of in the boonies. So I was always outside in the woods and I was active, but I was also kind of a chubby kid because I loved all the good food. My mom was a great cook, all that. So it was kind of a weird balance of things. Even though my dad was a physician at that time, doctors, I don't think really knew much about healthy eating and nutrition. And I still think that's a little bit true. And so, while my mom tried to have us eat really healthy food, for the most part, I had a big appetite and would sometimes gravitate toward the less healthy options. And then my dad, as an adult, developed type 2 diabetes. And we'll get into that later. But so I grew up in Bradford. I left Bradford and went to college in New Orleans, went to Tulane. Again, New Orleans, the land of fabulous, heavy, fatty health foods that are just delicious and so good. So I got really into that and was very much, going out to restaurants and eating at people's houses, cooking a lot. And that was tons of fun. However, right down the street from one of the places where I stayed for a while was a little health food market. And I remember seeing all these kind of hippie vegans in there and seeing their vegan things on the menu and thinking, they're really onto something there. But I just was not at that point in my life thinking about food in terms of health. It was more for enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived there for several years. And then fast forward on, I moved away from New Orleans eventually, went back to Texas for a while where I got my master's degree in library science. And I did that for 20 some years. And during that period, I moved out to Colorado. And I lived in Colorado for about 13 years. And that's a whole different thing because Colorado is such a healthy place. Everybody's fit. Everybody hikes, mountain bikes, snowboards, skis, cross-country skis, runners, there's, all kinds of rock climbers, mountain climbing, everything. So there is where I really started getting into health and fitness. I started working out at a gym regularly. I got really heavily into mountain biking. I became a snowboarding instructor. So that's where I kind of got into the health and fitness thing. But still, I was really into, I kind of considered myself a foodie. I would go to restaurants a lot, love to cook. But I did have a couple friends that were vegetarian and vegan. And so, I started getting a little bit into that, but never fully went that way because at the time it just seemed like, oh, that's too much. It's too much trouble. It's going to ruin my fun going out to restaurants. I'll never,
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I first started being more aware and sort of thinking that maybe I should pay a little more attention to that. So through a few more moves, I lived back in Texas for a while. I actually lived in Central America for a while, which was very eye-opening. I lived in Nicaragua.
Wow.
And that was, you buy your food for that day, basically. Like you go to the market and that's where you get your food for that day. And they even ask you, like, are you going to eat this today or tomorrow? Because they'll give you the more ripe fruits and vegetables that you're supposed to eat that day. So it's a different kind of mindset.
Wow.
So
Imagine that flying here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. So that was, a kind of a different way of looking at food. And, a lot of the people there grow their own food just in their yard. And I did a lot of that. I grew, squash and all kinds of tomatoes, different things. So that kind of, again, was different. So through a number of other different things, I wound up back in Texas. My mom is originally from Texas. My dad was from Bradford. And my dad passed away fairly young at age 72, I believe, 72 or 73. And he died of a combination of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. At the time, we didn't really realize that. It was like no one could figure out what was wrong with him. He developed a really terrible neuropathy that started out kind of in his side, and they thought maybe he had shingles, but it wasn't shingles. And then it kind of just spread into his shoulder, down his arm, into his leg on that side, got to the point where he could hardly walk, and he was in tons of pain. He ended up having a bunch of little TIAs and strokes and things. And at the time, it seemed like he just kind of self-destructed. But now looking back, knowing what I know what it was, and I know what caused it. And but at the time, even I think he as a physician didn't fully understand what was happening to him.
Sure.
So that all happened. And then through a number of things, I wound up back here settling in Texas. And during that time, at one point I was living in Austin, and I had a roommate for a little while who picked up this book called The Engine 2 Diet. And it was written by this firefighter that lived in Austin. It's called Engine 2 because that was his fire station too. And he was this guy, Rip Esselstyn. And he had written this book. And I guess my friend, I don't remember the details, but I think my roommate saw him speak somewhere and picked up a copy of the book because he thought it was really interesting. And he started following this diet. And I was watching what he was eating. And it was like he was eating tons of food and it was really good. And I was eating some of it with him. And but again, it was the way that it was described in the book was plant strong and plant forward. He didn't use the word vegan. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But again, I was still into going out to restaurants and I just didn't really think I wanted to fully go that way. But I thought, well, I'll do it once in a while and, can't hurt. So I kind of did that. But then I sort of veered away from it. I got married at a few years after that. And, we were really into cooking. And my ex-husband, who's still a very good friend of mine, he is Hispanic. And so he was really into, of course, we're in Texas, it's tacos and barbecue and Mexican food. And, he was really into all that. He was a great cook. And so we would cook and all this stuff. Well, here I was, in my 40s. And all of a sudden I started realizing like I'm putting on weight and I don't like how I feel. I feel all this brain fog coming on. I feel tired half the time. I just don't feel like me anymore. And I'll tell you, this is kind of a funny story. At the time, it wasn't funny, but now it's funny. Within the space of about a week, I had 3 different people. Now, this is in my late 40s. I'm in like perimenopause. 3 different people, and this is in my 40s, asking me, oh, are you pregnant? And I was like, yeah, I'm so fat that I look like I'm pregnant. And I tend to gain weight all in my middle, not my legs or arms so much. So yeah, I could see where they would have thought that. And I thought, I need to do something about this. This is not okay, you know.
Yeah.
And I've never had kids, and so even worse, like I have no excuse, you know. So I thought, okay,
Well, you've been living your life, right? You've been enjoying it.
Yeah,
You've been doing what you want to do. And then all of a sudden,
yeah. And I thought, wow, okay, I've got to get control of this. And I started thinking back to this Engine 2 thing that I'd done. And of any kind of diet, I mean, in the past, I had a friend who was a Jenny Craig client or a consultant. And so we did all that. We did the Jenny Craig diet. Did we lose weight? Sure. But we were starving to death. I mean, there's like this little portions of food you eat are like 3 bites, you know?
Right. You can have pizza, but just a bite.
Right, exactly. And, I had done Weight Watchers online, I'd done different things like that. And they were, okay, Weight Watchers was probably the most reasonable of all of them. But I was like, man, there's got to be something better. So I went back to this book, this Engine 2 diet book, and I really started reading on it. And it just started to click, and it really made sense to me. So I decided I'm just going to go all in and do it. And as I did it, I did more research. I learned more about it. And it really, I would say a month and a half. Well, no, it wasn't even that long. Probably about a month into it, I just started to notice that my clothes were fitting a lot better. I wasn't weighing myself much because I just think that's self-defeating. But my clothes were fitting better. And literally one day, I remember waking up and getting up, walking into the kitchen, and just all of a sudden feeling like I'm back. Like I feel like myself again. And my skin was clearing up. My skin had been breaking out. That was clearing up. I was losing weight, but I wasn't even really trying. I was never hungry. I felt like this like brain fog just went away. It was like gone. And really, it's just been the same ever since. I can't even imagine going back to what I used to do. This all just seems so normal to me now. But to me, it was just the best thing I'd ever done for myself. So I stayed with it. The more interested I became in it, I decided that I really wanted to be able to share this with people. So I went into looking for how can I educate myself further. During all this time, I went back to school. I already had my bachelor's and my master's degree. So I went back and got my associate's degree to become a physical therapist assistant. I'd always been interested in going into healthcare, and I just had done education for so long, and I just couldn't see doing it another 10, 20 years. And I was right down the street from this great community college. First, I thought I was going to do radiology tech, but you have to use needles and give people shots. I was like, no, can do. So, and it also just made more sense to me to do the physical therapist assistant program because I had already been an aerobics instructor. I had my personal trainer certification, all that stuff. So it just kind of fit right in with what I was doing.
Sure.
So I love that. And again, through that, what I really started happening when I got my degree and I started practicing, I saw these people that they were so sick. I mean, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease, wildly overweight, and really they'd come into us. I did mostly workers' comp claims at the clinics where I worked. They would come into us with injuries that they received at work. But the reason that the injuries happened had more to do with their physical condition than anything else. And I would just see what was happening to these people, multiple prescriptions, going to see doctors and not really understanding what the doctor was telling them and not understanding why they were sick and why they needed these prescriptions. And the more I realized about this, I thought, someone needs to try to educate people about this because people have no clue. And their doctors don't really have a clue about a lot of it, and they're not educating people.
Right.
And so that's who people trust. And I understand why, and we need doctors. Don't get me wrong. Like if I have appendicitis, if I have a broken bone, if I need a surgery, something like that, yeah, absolutely, we need doctors. They save lives. There is no question. But there's certain things that doctors receive basically no education on, which is things like nutrition, like sort of looking at the whole person, the holistic concept. A lot of them don't get that. So basically, I went and got my certification through Cornell University, a certification in plant-based nutrition, which is taught by T. Colin Campbell, who has his PhD, and he has the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies at Cornell University. And he is one of the authors of the China study, which is really important in the whole view of plant-based nutrition. And it's something that I think everybody should take a look at. What they basically did was they studied some very remote areas of China where people really had not been westernized, and their diet was basically just naturally a plant-based diet. Meat was very minimal. It was something that they maybe had once in a very great while, kind of just as a small addition to the vegetables and plant foods that they were eating.
Mm-hmm.
And those people virtually had zero heart disease, zero diabetes, zero cancer. The women didn't even report, they didn't even have a word for menopause because women didn't experience it the way Western women do.
And they were probably way more active too, right?
Very much more, because they're out every day working in their farm, working with all the things that they do. They're doing whatever their craft is. They have to walk everywhere. They're,
Yeah.
So they studied all these people, and then, they gathered all this data. And then, what's very interesting now is when you see where all this westernization has come in, and now these people have access to a lot more things like dairy, cheese, meat, fast food. All of a sudden, like, the rates of prostate cancer have gone through the ceiling, breast cancer, diabetes, heart disease, all these things these people never had. And now all of a sudden there it is. So the China study was really important, and it was done over a very long period of time. It was very well researched, well put together. It's a very solid, long-term, large study. So that's something, if anybody's interested in this, you can kind of Google the China study, and that gives you a lot of great information about this. It is very scientific and technical, though, so it's not like tons of fun reading, but it's good information.
Saturday morning, laying in bed with your coffee,
probably not. No,
it'll be good for conversation, though. I hope people look that up.
Yeah, and it's good if you're just looking for like hard facts and data. Like, is this really real? Like, what's the proof for this?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, like, with this whole discussion we're having today. Like, I could spit out facts and figures, and I could tell you percentages, and I could give you all these scientific metabolic processes that happen in our bodies. I mean, I can do that. But what I really would want to do more than that is just to get people really excited about the changes they can make in their life, and just their health and the environment and the planet, and just to kind of empower people to advocate for themselves and to do things to promote and increase and enhance their own health and well-being. You can look up the numbers, and I can too. And if anybody wants them, I can direct you to a million resources. But I think the main thing is just to get excited about what all these numbers and facts and data and studies mean for us. What can we do with that? Right. And what am I doing with it? So, yeah.
That's a lot. Wow. Yeah. You have been busy.
It's
beautiful, though. I love it. So if you have anything prepared, or we can kind of go through how you are being of service for yourself and other humans on the planet. Absolutely. And maybe without overwhelming anybody with information, but maybe giving, your top 10 tips of what to do when you're in the store choosing your foods, or how you prepare them, or maybe, just ideas of how they can incorporate a healthier plate at their dinner tables.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So what I am, and this plant-based nutrition certification I have, what I am, a lot of people are like, oh, you're vegan. Yes. But what I am is called whole food plant-based, which is vegan, but it's also very different from vegan. So a lot of people that are vegans are mainly more into the animal rights and animal activism end of things. I will be honest. I mean, my car has leather seats in it. I have leather purses. I have a cowhide rug in my living room. I mean, I believe
you're also from Texas, right?
Well, yeah.
Well, you're in Texas.
But I do believe in that, and that is a large part of why I think this is also a good thing. But that's not why I got into it initially. It kind of came along after that, and then I realized, wow, this is a great side benefit. But I'm whole food plant-based. So what that means, so you can eat Oreo cookies and potato chips all day long and still be vegan. Those things are vegan. There's no animal products in them. But whole food plant-based means you don't eat any animal products. That's like vegan. However, with whole food plant-based, we wouldn't do anything processed. So I'm not going to go buy a package of Boca burgers. out of the freezer at the grocery store and eat them. Those are highly processed, all kinds of chemical ingredients, lots of salt, lots of fat. That is not something I would ever eat. I don't eat any of the fake cheeses. There's some like Daya. I can't remember the other brands, but I don't do the fake cheeses. No, none of those fake things, fake deli meats and all that. Ugh,
Right.
Yikes. So, so it's basically no processed foods. I do eat cooked foods. A lot of people hear that and say, oh, so you're raw vegan. I'm like, no, plenty of cooked foods, but we want to stick with things that are as close to their natural state as possible, unprocessed. And so along with that comes, so that's no animal products, so no meat, no eggs, no dairy, no fake vegan products, and also no oil. Oil is highly processed. So to get 1 tablespoon of olive oil, you have to squeeze about 32 to 40 olives. And it's done in machines, and it's, all this stuff. So it's highly processed. Even the extra virgin, they say, oh, it's cold pressed, it's this, it's that. It's heart healthy, not so much. It's that many olives to get 1 little teaspoonful. So when you're eating oil, you're eating straight up fat and calories. And that's pretty much it. And we'll get to that. But so there's no oil. And I can talk about how you cook without it, because that's always a big question. So that's basically what I eat. A typical meal for me would be, say, a baked sweet potato with a big side of steamed broccoli and maybe some black beans. It's very simple. I don't do complicated recipes. I can, and sometimes I do, but I don't often. Another favorite thing is just to make a big giant salad. You want to stick with dark leafy greens as much as possible to get as much nutrition as possible, and put as many different veggies as you can think of that you like, put it in there, and then top that off with some really good oil-free dressing or sauce. The idea is what a lot of people refer to as a nutritarian diet. You're trying to get as much nutrition in per calorie as possible. So you want to go for high nutrient density, low calorie density. So in other words, you're eating a lot of food. I mean, I get to eat a lot, which is awesome because I have a big appetite. Like, for example, this morning for breakfast, I had a great big baked potato, and I stuffed it with some broccolini and some pinto beans. And I sprinkled a little bit of ground flaxseed meal on top to get some omega-3s, just about a tablespoon of that, and then some salsa. So, I eat weird things for breakfast.
Well, it's interesting. I've followed your photographs for a while now, and they look like gourmet meals.
They seem like it.
I'm sure. And can you talk just a few seconds about the taste of the food? Because what I think people, a lot of the resistance comes from, myself included. We go from these incredibly saturated foods with amazing flavors, although they're fake and synthetic, to something that's not really making my mouth very happy. So how do we incorporate spices and seasonings in foods like that? Because basically what we're doing is we have to reset the taste buds.
Yes.
Start accepting what real food tastes like.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I would say number one, food is emotional. We grow up associating food with love, with celebrations, with family, with traditions, with rewarding ourselves, with just everything that happens in life. Oh, let's have everybody over, and what is there? Food, right? It goes back generations in our families. That there's something my great grandmother prepared, and look, I still make it, and all these kinds of things. And those things are very difficult for us to let go of. That's ingrained. And not to mention, the many triumphs of marketing over science, all these things that people believe are so healthy. I mean, go into one of our grocery stores, there's an entire aisle of breakfast cereal. Oh my goodness. And it's all terrible for you for the most part. It's refined, it's full of sugar, it's full of artificial colors and flavors and preservatives, and basically zero nutritional value. But look at that whole aisle of this stuff. Like, oh my goodness, it's wild. And that kind of there's a way that all that started kind of back in the 40s and 50s, all these convenience foods that started coming out to like make things easier for mom who was at home preparing all these foods, and, TV dinners, the little old fashioned ones with the different sections with all that, and, all that kind of crazy stuff, Pop-Tarts, all these things. But we have just been conditioned to believe that all these foods are normal to eat. Portion sizes now, good Lord, you go into a restaurant, they bring you a plate of food that's enough to feed a family of 4.
Yeah.
But I watch people sit there and eat the whole thing, it's like, and there are actually people who are hired, and I can't remember which study I read this in, but I could find out. There's some people that are hired by like big food corporations, like the big giant ones, Nestle, Kellogg's, all those big ones, that they are actually scientists hired to determine the quote unquote bliss point of a food. How much sugar, salt, and fat do we need to have in this thing to make people crave it, keep eating it, and want more, more, more? It's a thing, the bliss point. They hire people to get foods to that point. So
I think that I've heard that before, but just hearing you say it now, like my stomach's doing flops. Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
It's almost like, I don't want to take the responsibility off of individuals, but it's almost like we never had a chance. Like,
right.
They're literally coaxing you in with this stuff. And because we know sugar is one of the most addictive substances, of course we want the boxed macaroni and cheese. Of course we want the Pop-Tarts. Of course we want that cereal.
Which have been designed in the perfect ratios to make you desperately want more of it.
That's what you just said, they've been designed, right?
Designed,
but
engineered.
God also designed a really fabulous buffet for us.
Exactly. So, and that's the thing. I think the hardest part for people to understand is that I think at least 50% of this, and probably more, it's up here. It's mindset. You have to kind of decide, I need to eat healthier. I want to be healthier. I want to fuel my body with things that really do taste good, but it's going to be a little bit of a time thing for me to get to the point where my taste buds and my brain can recognize that, because we've been so inundated.
And it's probably been so long since people have actually just felt really good. Like, when was the last time? I mean, I'm working on myself, so I know what it takes to help get yourself into that good space mentally and physically. But if you don't remember the last time that you actually felt really good, clear-headed, stable and strong and healthy, like, it's kind of a stretch for some people to, they'd rather just open the box than deal with feeling good. And so now you got to deal with the guilt, and now you got to deal with everything else.
It's true. And a lot of times people, if they've been in sort of not a great space, food has been their comfort. It's been their friend. And to say, well, they're taking that away from me now, that's a tough thing to get past. But I think once you get to a certain point, I know with me, it is the most empowering, liberating thing. Like, I'm so happy to be disconnected off of that grid. I'm no longer connected. Like, there's no food commercial that's going to affect me at all. I walk into the grocery store. I don't even go down those aisles in the middle. I stay in the produce section, maybe head to the pharmacy if I need some toothpaste, but I don't even go those areas where there's all those boxed things and oh gosh, I don't even go near there. I have no need for it. The meat area, no thank you. I just don't even touch it. So for me, it's been very liberating, very empowering. I eat great food. That was one of the things you were talking about. One of the things with what I do, I'm whole food plant-based, but that doesn't mean I don't use normal condiments and spices and seasonings. I do. I use ketchup. I use mustard. I use barbecue sauce. I buy fabulous infused balsamic vinegars that there's a store here in San Antonio, and I know there's one in Buffalo. But smaller towns, it can be tough, but you can order them online. Like fruit infused balsamic vinegars that you can put on things are fabulous. I use a little bit of things like Bragg's liquid aminos, soy sauce, but they're very high in sodium, so I try to minimize those, but a little bit of those goes a long way. I have a giant pantry full of every kind of spice and seasoning you can imagine. Mostly salt-free. I do use a teeny bit of salt here and there, but I try to keep that low. But lots of things like a salt-free Italian seasoning mix is my go-to. I use that in everything. I use a lot of smoked paprika is a life changer. Love that stuff.
Yeah.
I use a lot of, ginger, cayenne pepper, black pepper. I use, there's a company that I order a lot from called Penzeys Seasonings, and I believe there's one in Buffalo. They are fantastic. A lot of people get annoyed with him because he's real political, but
Pittsburgh too. I think there's one in Pittsburgh too.
Yeah, I think his motto is season liberally. So people get really offended. But if they do, he has a sister who has a company that she does not agree with his views. She sells the same stuff without all that. So you can go that direction if you want.
It's the same stuff at the end of the day, right?
Oh God. But anyway, spices are political. But tons of spices and seasonings. And what I tell people with the seasonings and spices, what we called it, the Engine 2 programs, the Esselstyn family, Rip Esselstyn, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. Rip has a sister, Jane, and then his mother, Anne, who have written a couple of cookbooks. That family and the Engine 2 program are really what I primarily follow. I feel like it's the most sound. It is the most well-researched. Rip Esselstyn's father is Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who was in charge of the cardiology department at the Cleveland Clinic for many years. He's a surgeon. He's still, even though he's now in his 80s, he still speaks and he still does consultations with people who are transitioning to this plant-based thing. He basically cured his patients using a whole food plant-based diet rather than medication. And he really believes that, the majority of cardiovascular disease can be not only prevented, but also reversed with a plant-based diet, and has proven it over and over and over in multiple studies.
Oh,
So
I think that's wonderful.
Family,
yeah.
Oh, it is. And that family and their books are mostly what I follow. So one of the ways that they describe using condiments is as a spark. Okay, ketchup, just regular normal ketchup. I try to buy organic, but sometimes I don't. It's full of sugar. We know that. But you're not drinking the bottle. You're using maybe a tablespoon. And so when it's combined with all the other food you're eating at that particular meal, it's not that high of a concentration of sugar or sodium that you're eating. So I say, if you love potatoes, make yourself some oven fries, oil-free. Just slice them up, put them in the oven, and dip them in ketchup. I mean, the ketchup, it's a comfort food. It's something you're used to. Things like barbecue sauce. Again, there's always sugar in them. It's almost impossible. The sugar-free ones have fake sweetener in them, and that's even worse.
Yeah.
So I just say get one that's made with sugar or molasses or maple syrup, something like that, and no oil, and use barbecue sauce on things. I put it on zucchini and stuff and put it on the grill, so I feel like I'm having barbecue. You can eat normal things that you're used to eating, but you just have to read labels and pay attention. So when you read a label, you're looking for no oil. You want to look for as few ingredients as possible. So, if the list is, 3 paragraphs long of things you can't pronounce.
They say if it's bigger than the width of your thumb, there's too many ingredients in it.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good gauge. You want to look for no high fructose corn syrup. You really want to stay away from that. It's in everything. And I tell people, stay away from that stuff.
It's just a coagulator, right? It's
nasty. It's highly
stuck together.
Yeah, it's gross. Yeah. You really don't want to eat it. And I always say with the sodium, what you want to look for is sodium, which is salt, which can raise your blood pressure and cause all kinds of other problems. Try to go for a 1-to-1 ratio with calories. So if one serving has 130 calories, it shouldn't have more than 130 grams of sodium. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if it's 20 calories, it shouldn't have more than 20 grams of sodium. So you want to try to keep it a 1-to-1 ratio, sodium and calories, if you can. You can't always, but but that's just a good way to kind of look at it. And that's something I do is I teach people about reading labels, looking at what's in your pantry. I recommend to people, look at what's in your pantry. And if there's stuff that's a trigger food for you that you're going to just sit there and eat the whole box or the whole bag, throw it out or donate it. If it's not open, take it to a food bank and donate it. Like, I have mixed feelings about that, because should we really be giving people this unhealthy food? But at the same time, hey, it's better.
You've already spent the money, so
yeah. So, but yeah, reading labels and paying attention to what you're eating. You want to, anything that you can't pronounce, if there's a whole lot of that, probably not great. Probably best to stay away from it.
Right.
So,
Can I interject here for just a second?
Yeah.
So if someone is wanting to explore this,
mhm,
describe your process with them a little bit.
mhm.
Are you a hand holder? Do you kind of give them things and let them go play with it for a while? Or do you really kind of transition them from their meat and potatoes staples into, this whole foods plant-based program?
Well, that's a good question. And it depends on the person. I personally went in whole hog. I jumped into it and I just did it. But I already loved vegetables. I was never much of a big meat person. So for me, it was an easy transition. It's going to depend on the person. Some people do better with just increasing the amount of fresh fruits and vegetables they're incorporating into their diet. Some people are ready to jump in 100%. Usually the first thing I do with someone is I talk to them about, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve with this? Because if they tell me, well, I need to lose 20 pounds for my high school reunion, I'm like, okay, this is probably not the way. I mean, you can do it and it's a good thing to do, but that's probably not a good goal in terms of why
sustainability. It's not really sustainable afterwards, right?
Right. So with this lifestyle, what I generally do with people is I find out what their goals are. And then I find out what they're eating now. Like, because a lot of people are already doing pretty well. They just need a few small tweaks. Like, I worked with one lady who she just could not get away from cheese. She was eating all these other vegetables and all this stuff, and she couldn't get away from the cheese. I said, you just have to stop buying it. I mean, just don't have it in your house. It's very simple. Just don't buy it. So what she had me do, I literally came to her house 3 times a week just to meet with her and go over how she was doing. And I would check her refrigerator and I would check in her pantry. And then I found out she had a refrigerator in her garage. So I would go look in there. And one time I found some cheese. I took it. I was like, nope, no more. We're going to get rid of that.
We have the cheese police.
The cheese police. So, I mean, so a lot of times, and like with another friend that I've been working with, his big thing is soda. He loves Pepsi. He's been drinking it his whole life. And he just cannot imagine his life without it, but he's getting better. He's getting to where he maybe drinks soda once a month, A lot of people, they can't get rid of, some particular thing whatever it might be, like pasta is a big one for some people. And that's a trigger for me. I have to be real careful personally with bread, pasta, and corn tortillas. Those can all fit into a whole food plant-based program if they're all whole grain, no high fructose corn syrup, low sodium, no oil. They can, but if I make a pot of whole wheat pasta, I'm very likely to eat the whole thing. And you can overeat on a whole food plant-based diet, certain things. So I have to be real careful with those things myself. So with somebody, what I would basically do is get their goals and then see what feels comfortable for them. Discuss, like, what do you feel like you could do? And one of the places I really like to have people start to make at least half of your plate, whatever you're eating, whatever meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, even a snack, make half of it something green. So let's say for breakfast, I'm going to have like a whole grain bran muffin that I made. I'd make these whole wheat bran berry muffins that totally fit into the whole food plant-based program. If I'm going to eat one of those, though, I need to eat an equal amount of greens. So I will make myself a small spinach salad, maybe with strawberries and mandarin oranges and some toasted walnuts. And then
So green eggs and ham doesn't work?
Without the ham and the eggs, the green will work.
Oh man. Okay.
I know.
Yeah, I get you.
But there are things like, if people are a lot of people are really used to eating eggs for breakfast. So sometimes I'll try to get them instead, try a tofu scramble. You get the silken tofu. You add a little turmeric, which is super healthy. And you can add some, garlic powder. There's different recipes for tofu scramble. Silken tofu, when it's cooked correctly, can be very similar to scrambled eggs. And it's got protein in it. It's got, lots of phytonutrients from the soybeans. Way better for you. Tofu is a little bit on the high fat side. I limit that a little bit in my diet for that reason. But there's nothing wrong with tofu. It's good to eat. You just don't want to eat tons of it every day. So I'll suggest trying that. A lot of people are, ooh, tofu, but I'm like, just try it. It's just a food. It's not going to kill you. People are very afraid of trying new foods. It's almost like a phobia with some
Well,
people.
that's the other part of this that you had touched on a little bit about the emotional part of it. Because I know for myself, I have been known to completely check out when when I have something in front of me that's really delicious. And most often it's because I'm emotionally stunted, or something horrible happened that day, or I'm about to go into something that may be uncomfortable. And so the emotional attachment that we have to the comfort of food, like you said, the way we were all really basically brought up, if you're really good, you get given a cookie or a piece of candy, not a piece of broccoli or an apple.
At the doctor's office.
And the doctor's office, the dentist would give out suckers, lollipops, right?
That doesn't make any sense.
I thought that was the strangest thing, but.
So what I basically tell people to do is you've got to develop a different system of rewarding yourself, of thinking about pleasure, about thinking of feeling good. So one of the things I suggest to people, like if you're female, and I primarily work with women, but I've been doing a lot more with guys. If you're, let's say that you've done a whole week of this plan and you're sticking with all whole foods, plant-based, you're doing great. But at the end of the week, maybe what your normal thing to do was go out with your girlfriends and have a couple of margaritas and a big plate of nachos. Okay, well, that's not really going to fit with what you're doing. But instead, treat yourself to go get a massage, get a pedicure, go to, get some kind of holistic practitioner, and maybe it's acupuncture, maybe it's Reiki, maybe it's, reflexology, whatever thing you like, go and do that. That's your reward. And then the other thing is to stop looking at these food occasions that way. Look at them as social occasions. So, for example, when I go out to meet a bunch of friends, I have not 100% given up alcohol. I will still have a drink every now and then, but that for me, more than anything, is it just doesn't work for me anymore. It doesn't agree with me, and I end up with stomach issues and feeling terrible, and it's just not worth it. But what I will do is I will go out and I will order, I'll go to the bar and order just a club soda with a lime, but I'll tell them to put it in a glass that looks like a cocktail glass, so that nobody's like, why aren't you drinking? Then they don't even know.
I hate that question.
So I ask them, I say, please don't put up one of those big, giant, red, clear water glasses. Like, I want it looking like a cocktail. And they'll, okay, then they'll do it. So I'll just have the soda water. And then, when all these people are ordering all this food, I have this mantra that I just say over and over in my head, not my food. That is not my food. And I just keep saying it, not my food. And I keep reminding myself, like, you are empowered. You are liberated from this. This is not part of what you do. And then I just try to really focus on the conversations I'm having, spending time with the people, whatever place I'm in. That's another thing for me. Wherever I go out to eat, if I go somewhere, the atmosphere has to be fantastic, because really that's what I'm there for. I'm not really there for the food.
You're there for the experience of it all, right? Everything, the social, the ambiance. Right. Yeah.
Yep. So it's a big mindset, and you have to consciously do it at first. At first, you have to really keep saying these things to yourself. Now for me, it's automatic. But first I would just have to keep saying, okay, not my food, not my food. Sometimes I would even get up and walk away from the table for a minute, walk into the restroom, wash my hands in some cold water, and be like, okay, you can do this. It's a process, and it's a challenge for a lot of people. And some people, like I said, more than others. If you're someone who's like, ew, I hate anything green, it's going to be tough. But I believe that anyone at any age can change their taste buds. They generally say that it takes like 3 months for something to become just a normal thing in your life. So say, let's say that you decide to start eating greens on a regular basis. It might take you 3 months to really feel normal about that. If you're trying to get rid of salt, it's going to take you a while. But our taste buds completely regenerate, I want to say something like every 12 days.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So as that happens, then also your brain, our brain has tons of what's called neuroplasticity. You probably know this. A lot of people don't. Your brain is constantly creating new neural pathways and new ways of connecting different things. So the more you keep telling yourself these things, the more you keep practicing these things, the more you keep changing the way you eat, eventually you're going to start, like when you bite into a stick of celery, it's going to taste super salty. and really juicy. Like to me, when I eat a piece of celery now, it tastes really salty, which years ago, no way. It just tasted bland and nothing. Like when you bite into a strawberry, it's going to be super intense and taste really sweet. Whereas before, maybe not so much. But you have to give your brain and your body and your taste buds and everything just a chance to adapt and believe that it's going to happen.
So that's where mindful eating comes in, right? Everything, and that's something that I promote on the daily is you have to be mindful of your thoughts, you have to be mindful of your behaviors, mindful of your choices. And
Absolutely.
because so much, I mean, food is one of those things that we do on autopilot. You know, we
Right.
go into wherever we're going, we order that and we eat it and we go about our day. We don't even think about it. And not to make food like this thing that you have to continually focus on and get right. But if you can understand that food, it can be for pleasure, but it's mainly to fuel your body and your mind. Like you cannot expect to function optimally if you are having the typical traditional American diet. You just can't.
What we in the plant-based world call it is the SAD diet, the standard American diet.
And then it's very SAD. Apropos.
And it's very interesting because you know, there's just an epidemic of type 2 diabetes, of cardiovascular disease, autoimmune problems, cancer, and it just keeps going up and up and up. And, you know, Hippocrates was kind of the father of modern medicine way back in the day. And, you know, all physicians take the Hippocratic Oath, which is to do no harm. Hippocrates also said something else. And this is one of the things he's not as well known for, which was let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. And it's very true. You know, I would say even the American Heart Association, and I think this is a low estimate, they say that 80 to 85% of heart disease can be addressed through diet. Dr. Esselstyn and some of these plant-based doctors will tell you that it's probably even higher in the 98%. And same thing with type 2 diabetes. The truth is, the majority, I would say 90-some% of people, based on the research I've done, that it's different depending on who you look at, but 90-some% of those people never have to have it and can easily reverse it. Type 1 diabetes is a whole different thing.
Right.
That's your body's inability to do certain things. Type 2 diabetes is what is called in some circles disease of affluence, meaning it's places where you have lots of access to high fat foods. It's a lifestyle disease. It is literally caused by insulin resistance. People think it's caused by sugar. It is not. It's caused by fat. I could go into the science about it, and I will slightly, but basically what happens is from eating too many animal products with too much fat in them, your cells, your intramuscular cells, your fat cells, all the cells in your body are hypersaturated with energy. You've got too much fat in your system. So here comes insulin, which is like the key to unlock your cells to let in the glucose that comes from the food you're eating. But your cells already have too much energy. So they're like, no, we won't take it. And that is what is called high blood sugar. The blood is just circulating with all the sugar still in it because it can't go into the cells because they're hypersaturated from all these high fat foods and all these animal products that we're eating. So people are like, oh, it's the sugar that causes the diabetes. It's not. That's a symptom. Yeah. It's the fats. So
it's the fats, but it's also the lack of movement. You know, my mother had type 2 diabetes from the age of 50, I think early 40s, 50. But she loved to eat. She loved food, and she was the most fantastic cook. But she didn't, you know, I think her activity was when she would get pissed off, she'd walk around the house 12 times, like outside, like just stomping around. But that was it. But that was never part of her upbringing. That was never part of her anything.
Right. So my mom is that generation too. They didn't exercise much. And I will tell you, movement is so important. And we'll talk about that too. But I will tell you, you know, as a physical therapist assistant, as a personal trainer, as someone who's been very active my whole life, I'm going to say this, the number one thing, it's the food. The food is the number one thing. You cannot out exercise a bad diet. It is impossible. There are some people who, you hear stories about these guys that are, marathon runners, ultra runners, that all of a sudden drop dead of a heart attack.
Yeah.
What's on the outside does not necessarily tell you the full story of what's happening on the inside.
That's very true, actually. There's a documentary, a film. It wasn't one of the ones that you recommended me watch, but in that story, there were two brothers. One of them was obviously overweight, and the other one was, I don't know, normal by his age standards. And it turns out when they were getting their physicals and checkups, is that the one that was thinner was actually technically more obese on the inside than he was outward physically. So yeah, I totally 100% understand that.
Yeah, that can happen. And so with this whole food plant-based diet that I do, that one of the pillars of it is the greens and eating the dark leafy greens. When you eat those, and this is another thing that helps to address not only the type 2 diabetes, but cardiovascular disease. When you eat dark leafy greens, this is a long scientific thing, which I won't bore you with, but your body produces something called nitric oxide. Mm-hmm. And when this is circulating through your bloodstream, through your veins, your arteries, it basically cleans out all those fatty, waxy plaques that can build up from years of eating high-fat foods, animal foods, things like that. So
they act like scrubbing bubbles, right?
Yeah, it's like it goes in and just cleans out all this stuff. And you can see there's several studies that you can look up online with from Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, where it shows there was one patient I remember that came in, and you could just see on his heart one of the main arteries. I can't remember which one it was. It's the one that causes those heart attacks, called a widowmaker. That's like one of the main arteries on the heart that just becomes completely blocked, and they just die. So this guy had almost full blockage of that. He was supposed to undergo bypass surgery, all this stuff. And this Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn said, look, let's try this first. So you can look online and see this guy's heart, the first picture of the blockages. Then after, I can't remember, I want to say it was like 6 months, you see it and it looks like a perfectly normal heart with the blood circulating. Wow. It's amazing what it can do. A lot of people will ask me, but what about smoothies? Can I do a green smoothie? It's not the same thing. You need to chew your food. So digestion begins in your mouth. When you drink something, you're bypassing. So when you chew your food, there's a few things that happen. One is that the food gets broken down into smaller pieces that are easier for your stomach to digest, but they're not pulverized pieces. They're not little tiny things. So it's going to take a little longer for your stomach to deal with them. And you want that. You want it to be a nice, slow process. So when you're chewing your food also combines with saliva, which contains all sorts of amino acids, for example, like amylase, which starts to break things down so that your body can turn all this food into glucose and get all the nutrients out of it that it needs. So you want to be chewing your food. In addition to all that, when you're eating and chewing your food, your brain is getting the signal, I ate, I've eaten, I'm eating something.
Yeah.
And so when you're just swallowing something, what happens is people have great intentions and they make these green smoothies, but then they don't ever really get that signal that I've eaten something. And so then they end up eating on top of having the smoothie. So they're really like doubling their calories. Yeah. And they don't understand why they're not losing weight. Why am I not getting these benefits? But it's best to always chew your food. So if let's say you're going to make a green smoothie, and in it, you're going to put spinach and celery and pineapple and apples and blueberries. Just put all that in a bowl and eat it. That's what you want to do. Put it in a bowl and eat it. And you can, what I do with a lot of mine, like if I'm going to do greens, like kale, for example, a lot of people are like, oh, kale, it's like eating a bunch of weeds. Okay. Yeah, it can be. I put it in the microwave with nothing on it, or maybe some garlic powder or something. But if you're going to eat it with fruit, you don't want to do that. But just put it in the microwave for 1 minute. That's it. Just plain by itself. Put a big pile of it in the microwave for 1 minute. And it's going to become a lot easier to chew, a lot more palatable, a lot easier to eat. You want to eat as much, like I said, of the greens as anything else. So like if I'm making if I'm making like the smoothie bowl, I call it. So it's all the stuff you put in a smoothie, but it's in a bowl. If I'm having like a banana and some blueberries and pineapple in there, equal amount of greens. And then you can use like I said, like a fruit infused vinegar on it. Or you can make a salad that has spinach, things that you would normally put in a salad, and then just add in some fruit if you like fruit in the morning, things like that. All these like protein shakes. People ask me, that's another big thing, protein. How do you get enough protein on this diet? We have been bamboozled by the meat industries.
Well, and I just want to backstep for just 2 seconds because I don't prefer the word diet because I believe what you're doing is a lifestyle, right?
It is.
You've changed what you're doing. So I think that's really important for people to understand that this isn't something that you would do for 6 months or a year. And then, yay, I get to go back to my burgers and shakes and all that kind of stuff. So it really is, if you're serious about your health, if you're serious about reversing any of the aging process that is showing up for you, it is a lifestyle change, and it will need to, be a consistent lifestyle change.
It is. And I think once you make those changes, you kind of reach a point where you don't want to go back because you start to realize all these other things too. It's like I said, I went into it for health reasons, but then I started to learn about the planet and what is happening to our planet with animal agriculture. And it's just absolutely astounding and scary. Then you start looking at the animal activists, which I think, that again is not why I went into it, but I think it's such a wonderful benefit of this lifestyle is that so many less animals are being treated horribly. And, and that's the thing, like a lot of vegans that are vegan only for the animals will say, well, it's just for the animals. I'm like, I've got news for you. You're an animal. Don't you care about the well-being and health of you and your fellow human animals? I mean, we're all animals, and like animals tend to eat what they're supposed to eat when left on their own. We should too. And all these commercial products we've been sort of force fed basically, they're not helping us. That's why so many people are sick and why we have these expanding rates. But that's why I always tell people, like, try to stay away from those commercially prepared powders and bars and pills and supplements and all these things, because they're commercially prepared, marketed, advertised. They're really not things we were ever meant to be eating in the first place.
There's a phrase that I always come back to. If your grandmother doesn't know what's in it, you shouldn't be eating it, right?
Right. That's a great one. Yeah. Well, and I know there's a lot of people who really believe, I know there's people say, but what about, all these bodybuilders, they, protein powder, we really only need about 5 to 10% of our diets to be from protein. Truly, there's tons of research that'll back that up. And people say, oh, but plant proteins aren't complete proteins. Well, they are. You can get all the protein you need. Calorie per calorie. Broccoli has more protein per calorie than beef per calorie. So you'd have to eat a lot of it. But what I'm saying is you're going to get all the protein you need from whole grains, even things like oats. I eat oatmeal a lot for breakfast. Oats are great. Gluten-free oats are a fabulous way to get carbs, but also protein. A leaf of spinach has protein in it. Beans are a great source. Any kind of pulses, legumes like lentils, beans, peas, tons of great protein in those. Basically, when you look at a chart that shows like a typical whole food plant-based diet and a day that's got a good variation of things you're eating, you're going to get more than enough protein. You're going to get way more than 10% of your diet is protein. We don't need that much. All these things like, the keto diet and these high protein, low carb diets, they are not sustainable. They are not healthy. They are completely lacking in appropriate nutrition. There's virtually no fiber in them, which is a terrible problem that most Americans have, is that we are fiber deficient. Our gut biomes are all messed up because we don't eat enough fiber. We're not eliminating things properly. So, all these questions that people have, well, how do you get your protein? Well, what about calcium? There's more calcium in kale than there is in a glass of cow's milk. So all these things, there's one thing that I love to remind people, like, for example, with the keto diet. People love to hear good news about their bad habits. Mm-hmm. And that's something I learned from a plant-based doctor that I follow a lot, Dr. John McDougall. Of course, people are going to love hearing about the keto diet. Whoa, you mean I can lose weight and eat blocks of cheese and rashers of bacon, and I can eat, prime rib and all this, I'm going to lose weight? Well, you know what? You will lose weight if you do that for a while. But what happens when you're on a keto diet is your body starts to run off of ketone bodies, which are a type of fuel produced by your liver that would happen in like a famine situation. Your body is in an emergency stress state when you're doing that. There is nothing healthy about that. It's something that your body does. For example, like back in the day of, when we were hunters and gatherers and that kind of thing, if you didn't have access to food for a long time, it was a way that your body could survive until they killed another mastodon or until you came someplace where there were some berries or whatever. It's not a normal state.
Yeah.
But people love to hear that, oh, this is a great way that I can lose weight. It's not a great way. It's not sustainable. And over time, it's going to cause you a lot of trouble.
No, it's just so indicative of just our culture in general, is that, well, there's something that I want and I don't want to do anything that I'm uncomfortable with, but I still want to get it. And
right.
So, wow, this is a lot of really great information that you have just shared with us. There's so much. Is there some place where people could reach out to you or find you? Do you have a website or an email or anything that I can put it in the information in the podcast link itself?
Yeah,
so.
I'll give you my email that they can put in. I think I sent you a copy of my business card that you could include in that also.
Okay.
And then I have lists of all kinds of resources. I mean, it's literally so much. Like, let's see, right here, I have a list of all these plant-based doctors, And the one thing that I want to point out also is the people that I follow for this whole food plant-based thing, all these doctors, these are not like fringe, weird people that kind of came out of the woodwork and are promoting some weird, strange, fad type thing. These are MDs, DOs, people that have received their degrees from well-known, very highly respected universities. They work at large medical research institutions that are highly respected, very mainstream. And they're people who, really have done their research, know what they're doing. These are not fringe. These are not outliers. These are very highly respected doctors who can, really give you a lot of different perspectives and enlightenment on this type of lifestyle. There's tons of websites. There are tons of books. I mean, it's so much. Like what I could really do, I can give you kind of a list. I can email it to you that you can post if you want.
Yeah.
And I had started a Facebook page and I was going to start a website, but then my whole life kind of flip-flopped where I was taking care of my mom and kind of put everything on hold. But I'm going to get going on that again and get that finished and started. So I'll have tons of resources that people
Good. I think that would be a really beautiful community to start up, even for people to, have someone like yourself. Because I know a lot of local people anyway, are familiar with you. And it's nice to be able to have access to someone who has gone through it and who can kind of answer the questions. So I'm going to do a little segue here before we finish. And this is something that I ask all of my interviewees. How do you, and this is kind of completely opposite of what we've just been talking, not opposite, but how do you, in your current life, how do you find joy, ease, and peace in your life right now? What do you do?
So, well, for me, my life has been a 3-ring circus for the last year. I went through a divorce, moved 3 times, moved my mother several times. What I have really, really focused on is just staying centered and keeping active physically. And I mean, aside from all these things I'm doing, every day I get up and I try to do at least 3 sun salutations, do a little yoga. I set up in my new house a room that is dedicated to meditation and exercise and yoga. It's very little furniture. It's got some pillows on the floor. I try to meditate at least 10 to 15 minutes a day if I can. If I can't, 5 minutes is better than 0. I try to get outdoors. Outside is where I feel the best connection to nature. Get my shoes off and put my feet on the ground. Do a little, some people call it grounding or earthing, but where you're connected to nature. I try to get out and do some hikes. Another thing for me is music. I really love music, live music in particular. So even if I'm having a really busy week and I feel like, oh gosh, I just don't have time for this, I'll try to go out and see some kind of live music, or at least put some kind of music on in the house, dance around a little bit by myself or with a friend or with my dog or who's ever available. I think that is so good for us. And I think a lot of people have forgotten how to just be playful and have fun and enjoy music and just being silly. So those are some things that I really try to focus on. And honestly, I really enjoy my time in my kitchen. I love to go. There's a little local farm where I go, and they're the cutest old Italian family. And I love to get their produce and bring it home, wash it, get it ready, chop up veggies, have them all prepared, put them in my refrigerator, and I, turn on some music and do all that. And that's kind of my time to decompress. So those are the things that I really like. Also, stand-up paddleboarding is something I've come to really love. I love to get out.
Yes.
Yeah. I live a place up in the hill country here in Texas, about an hour away, where there's a river, and getting out on that paddleboard on the river, and I like to go early in the morning or late in the evening when nobody's there. You can hear all the birds and all the moss hanging from the trees and see the fish and the turtles. And that to me is the most zen, peaceful, awesome experience.
I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I didn't realize Texas had so many things to offer.
Oh yeah, tons of rivers and lakes. You'd be amazed.
I got to get out more, I think.
It's cool. You come visit.
Oh, well, Ann White, thank you so much. This has been, wow. I feel like I've just gone to school, and this is stuff that actually should be in our schools, and, starting a new education system for our little ones coming up. I think it's really important work that you're doing. And
Thanks.
I'm just so grateful that you could be here with me today and share this with the rest of the world and whoever's out there listening.
Absolutely. And I feel like I just barely scratched the surface. Like when I was trying to prepare for this, my brain was just like, how am I going to get all this information? I mean, there's so much more to it, and I'm always available to people. Anybody, you'll have my contact information. People can find me on Facebook. People that already know me can contact me. I love to promote this. This really is my passion. I believe it 1000% that this is the best thing anybody can do for their health. I really do. And so, here I am. I'm ready to help anybody out who's interested. So.
Well, I will definitely have you back, and maybe over the course of the next year or whatever, we can do little specific segments on, just collard greens or something like that.
Do a cooking demo. It would be fun. There's lots of things we can do.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
We will go to the supermarket and just do the perimeter, and leave all the cheese and the dairy in the stores.
And get your greens.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ann.
And that wraps up another episode of We Are the Medicine podcast. Wanted to take a moment to thank you and to let you know that I am grateful and I appreciate you so much. I see you. I hear you. I do understand. If you feel called, subscribe to my channel, like, share, comment with it, and check out my website for future happenings, DaniaAnastasia.com. That's all for now. I love you so much. It's crazy.